Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Zube lecture series. My name is Frank Sliegers. I'm Associate Professor of Landscape Architecture at LARP. And thanks again for everybody who's helping to make this possible, including Nathan Chung, who is the TA, and also coordinator behind the scenes, also Stacey Richardson. Zube founded this lecture series and endowed money to bring world-class speakers and scholars to our department to stimulate and enrich our academic community in landscape architecture and planning. So next Zube lecture is Thursday in a week. We have Sarah Jensen Carr, Assistant Professor of Architecture from Northeastern, and she will talk about embodied environments. So please join us also next week. Okay, and yeah, so now we have a special day today. We have an LA alumni panel. Thank you everybody for coming. And Nathan, could you share the poster so you can see the people in a little more designed fashion here and orderly fashion. And begin with Aaron Fearing, graded from 2015 from our program. And he has been established himself as a project design lead at Stantec in Boston. And Adam is also found on events manager of the BSLA Sketch Boston, and has also guest lectured at LARP between art illustration, graphic design. He does wonderful drawings and designs. I remember that even back in the day, and has been support for our programs. And then we have Dan Gordon, principal at Dan Gordon Landscape Architects. Dan Gordon is a founder and principal of DGLA. He graded from 1983 from our undergrad program before joining GSD. And then before he formed his firm, he gained knowledge on major projects on the East and West Coast, the Boston Artery being part of it. And Dan's firm's work is outstanding. He is actually inducted into the New England Design Hall of Fame for his outstanding body of work. And his designs received and are still receiving many awards. So thank you. Yeah, Katya Ostermeier. She's landscape architect and partner of principal at WOLA. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Kathryn grew up in the metro area of LA and had a previous career in experimental film and contemporary art before she founded her firm together with Emily Wright. And Kathryn received the Bachelor of Arts from Smith, and in landscape architecture UMass in 2012. And WOLA is a certified women's business enterprise with office in Boston and northern areas. And her firm works on multiple scales. Then we have Lorna Stimson, partner and landscape architect at Stimson. Lorna holds a Master of Landscape Architecture and Regional Planning from our program in 2006, and has focused her work on projects with a particular connection to history and culture interpretation, as well as ecological restoration. And as you probably all know, Stimson is an award-winning office based in Cambridge and Princeton. They're doing great work, including, you know, the landscape of a building here. This was an award-winning project, and their work also covers multiple scales. Then we have Russell Stott, owner at Andover Landscape Design and Construction. Russell graded as a senior in 2008 from a BSLA program. And then he joined then Associates in Woburn. And after 5 years, he worked at the ground manager at Phillips Academy in Andover. And there he worked with an Olmsted design landscape and brought it back to its original vision. Russell joined Andover Landscape Design and Construction in 2014 and became also a firm partner in 2019. So that's like 2 years ago. And Andover Landscape focuses on craftsmanship and beautiful outdoor spaces that are both functional and beautiful. Then we have Sean Smalls, project manager at Design Workshop. He graduated from UMass in the field of building sciences and landscape architecture in 2009. Sean worked in Florida in diverse firms and in the LA area as a design manager. And before he was working, or in between in our industry, he was also a professional football player. So Design Workshop is a particular firm, 1969, Design Workshop, international design studio that integrate landscape architecture, urban design, economics, and engagement. Terrific firm. I should look this firm up. I mean, they're doing many work. I think we have some of our other alumni working there. Then we have Victor Chulack, associate at James Corner Field Operations, where he is an associate. And Victor has been designer on several projects, from conceptual competitions to design build projects, ranging from large-scale infrastructure to rooftops. And Victor is currently working on a project in New York City. Victor graduated from UMass with a BSLA in 2010 and got his MLA from UPenn at 2013. And then finally, we have a special guest, not alumni, Gretchen Rabinkin, executive director from Boston Society of Landscape Architects. And Gretchen worked formerly also for the Boston Society of Architecture. Gretchen has a degree from Smith College in 1992 and GSD in 1997. And Gretchen also taught here in the department. And I think through Gretchen, we continue our great relationship with the BSLA. And so Gretchen will be maybe another, I'm moderating this year, but Gretchen will be helping me out and maybe create a more diverse and intense discussion with our guests. So thank you everybody for joining us. And yeah, so maybe you can, so how should we begin? Key questions. So the topic today is the future of the profession. Who wants to start? What's the future?
I understand that Gretchen has some slides, and also she had a Google survey she created. I don't know if you want to start with that. But
yeah, I would either go first or go as cleanup, whichever you like.
Yeah, just go first, and then we just, I think, I mean, it's kind of, normally we would have this in a big panel room, and so yeah. Cool.
Well, like any of you, I can talk to these slides to 2 minutes or 20 minutes or longer, and we'll try to keep it super short and make them mostly just things to start to put out there, and perhaps as a way to start launch this conversation, and then Lauren and Dan and Adam and everybody else can really get into the details of their practices and their perspectives on the future of the profession. And let me just see if I can make these slides go forward. There we go. So yes, despite our historic name or our stubborn name, we are actually the Massachusetts and Maine chapter of ASLA, and I like to play with the cities. So from Portland to P-Town, Amherst to Augusta to Arlington to, yes, Boston. As BSLA, we strive to connect, convene, and celebrate landscape architects and the greater design community to support you at every stage of your career and work to advance the profession, supporting the creation of extraordinary environments. And by extraordinary, it's resilient, equitable, beautiful environments throughout the region and the world. I come to this, as Frank mentioned, from a design background myself, but I'm particularly excited by what we can do as a collective that complements or amplifies challenges and creates space not available within the constraints of regular practice. But then, thinking about where we are as a profession and where landscape architecture is, it's an extraordinary moment. And I'll start here with this image from Boston, which you might have seen last week with Chris Reed. We've got a big city mayor, well, a mayor for a few more days anyway, who announced, a couple years ago now, Boston is building not barricades, but beaches and parks and open space. This is our vision for a resilient Boston. And so we have a city and really a region that is starting to look landscape first and landscape forward as we approach the challenge of climate change. Right. This is landscape architecture. Walsh doesn't call it that, but that's what this is. And when you start to unpack that scape rendering there and all of that fuzzy green and that big, bird's eye aerial, there's actually projects by dozens of firms, including many UMass alumni, some of you that are actually planning, designing, building those projects that are creating climate resilience. And as we were talking a little bit before we started, it is the big fancy projects like Moakley Park, which I trust Chris showed you last week, but it's also things like this streetscape in Cambridge that are part of it too. It's happening at every scale. And as BSLA, part of what we try to do is to also have an ongoing dialogue and growing dialogue with our elected officials at the state, local, in this case, federal level. Actually, I'll give a shout out here to LARP alum Sherry Ruane, but this is a boat tour we did now in the before times when we were allowed to gather like this, when we actually looked around the harbor at some of those projects in place. In this case, this is Senator Warren's chief of staff, Adrian Vega there, but with some of our elected officials to start to communicate about, what this all looks like on the ground as we start to grow support at the state, local, and federal level for this work. And of course, I know some of you were part of this project, and Carolina might even be on the call, sitting in this collective view that I get to have. There's, that question of how do we use our landscapes as a place to improve them and to teach about them as we imagine a future together. And so this is, Carolina's project with some of you, Future Waters on the East Boston Greenway. And what's actually built here is the projected flood elevation, but done so in this evocative, artful way, so that as we have these abstract planning conversations around, what sea level rise might look like, here somebody could actually walk by and feel it, or in this case, hover under it. And it too has prompted conversations, and that work continues. I know some of you were part of Future Rising Emotions as well. As I think about where we are as a profession and as landscape architects and landscape architecture, we're in a moment of tremendous promise, yet also tremendous responsibility. Even these past few months, or perhaps especially these past few months, these past 12 months, it's almost a year. But as we've been in the pandemic, the importance of our public spaces and our open spaces at every scale, from the backyard to the front yard, to the street, to the, our town conservation lands, the whole gamut have been vitally important. These places have been underrun, or overrun rather, as Sherry and Gary Hildebrand and Chris Reed, Julia Africa, right there in that Globe op-ed, now more than ever, our parks must be understood as essential public infrastructure. We must shift our thinking to repurpose public spaces during times of crisis, restore their ecologies when the crisis abates, and adapt our parks to better accommodate urban populations, especially those who have been historically underserved, for the future. And Kathy Abbott writes, also a UMass alum or LARP alum, writes on similar veins as well. And I wanted to pull this one into the conversation too. This is a piece by Rhiannon Gibson, who is actually not a designer, but a public health researcher who is writing about, and let's see if my glasses, my glasses don't quite work on the small screen that I have here, but she's writing, yeah, every year extreme heat kills more people in the United States than any other weather-related event. And communities of color are disproportionately affected. With fewer parks, trees, and open green space, many under-resourced Black and Latinx neighborhoods will swelter this summer as they continue to fight the pandemic. And so as I read that, I too say that is landscape architecture. That's the terrain that we're working in, and that's part of what the present and the future of our profession is. And so I'll conclude that saying, yes, you know, your work, our work matters more than ever in every community and at every scale. This is a terrific map that Matthew Cunningham pulled together. And this is just a 1 mile, you know, a 1 mile square in Cambridge. And those red dots represent projects, residential projects that his firm has worked on. And so I know it's, you know, perhaps easier, we talk a lot about the big public projects like the Moakley Parks, but the, you know, this happens across the scale, and collectively the work that you're doing, you know, and Dan and Lauren and all of you on this, you know, on this Zoom adds up that positive cumulative impact of residential work or of all of your work are only beginning to be understood, as Matthew writes. Together they restore habitat, repair irreplaceable ecologies, and mitigate climate change. And so for the last slide I want to show is the cover of our field book, our annual book that just came out, and hopefully some of you are starting to get this in your mailbox. Every scale matters and every voice matters. And I know there's some LA, you know, Lauren's in here, Shamar's in here, there's some LARP folks in this mix, but in this particular issue, we include all of the editorial voices are by folks who identify as Black, Indigenous, or persons of color. It is beyond time that those who design this built world reflect those who live in it, and that we as a profession champion and amplify and draw together those voices too. And so thank you for being with us today. Please use your voice, and I'll put a link to the survey in the chat, because that's a way that you can help us help you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And so, and it's, yeah, so yeah.
This is a great introduction. So yeah, you guys,
there we go.
Somebody wants to start, or I mean, what would you recommend a student who graduates this year or next year? What would you recommend? Maybe that's a question that every student has probably. How do you and maybe how are your firms doing at the moment? I mean, so it seems that landscape architecture is on a great trajectory. And that's very promising.
Yeah, I was going to jump in and just follow up on what Gretchen laid out. Really a lot there. And also what you said, there's sort of two scales of kind of conversation we could talk about here. We can talk about really the kind of high level future of landscape architecture. We can talk about like what's happening in the offices right now. There's a ton of activity, huge interest in outdoor space. There's this pressure. Everybody needs to get outdoors just to socialize. So we're seeing a lot of energy in that, and a lot of interest in residential landscapes and places that people can get out to. So there's a lot of activity there. But really at the high level, I think, you know, that's kind of what I was going to talk about, and Gretchen really tapped into it. I think the biggest question of our time is going to be global warming. And it's really a question that's been there all along. How do we, as human beings, create spaces that are meaningful and work with nature? And it's been this ongoing thing for like 2,000 years of landscape architecture. And I could get into the detail on that, but I think that's really what in our time it's going to be about. And there's technology. We're in the information age, so it's layered in with technology, and how we express that and how we build places that are connected to place, that reflect our aspirations and our need to live in harmony with nature is going to be the future of landscape architecture, and it always has been. So I think I could go on, but that's kind of two pieces, and I'll just kind of toss it out there, and I can come back to it, but I'd be interested in what other panelists have to say.
Yeah, so I think sort of going off of what Dan started, obviously climate, a changing planet is one of the driving sort of aspects of our profession and what we focus on and what we will do. And I think the way this sort of, there's so many ways, it's such a big problem. Literally the world is changing and we sort of have to respond and react and adjust to it. And a lot of it is a question of scale. And so, you know, a lot of our projects are sort of broken down into small bits. They have boundaries, right? Where climate change, where natural systems don't in the same way we do. So we have to sort of try and tie into a system that is boundless within a given plot. Here's your square. This is your project limits for the most part. That's the way most projects are going to be functioning. Some of them will be sort of visionary master planning on sort of large areas, usually urban areas. But I think ultimately the thing to tie in is that as we sort of design and we create these sort of, each project that we work on, each one that we're engaged with, is that these are places for people. We're designing for other humans. If we were purely doing it for some naturalistic system, we could get engineers and horticulturalists and natural experts, and sort of our job is to synthesize all those things into a place for other human beings to sort of share and to create a relationship with that sort of natural greater system. So to really tackle these climate change, you need huge sort of government level things to be tackled all the way, and then sort of how to sort of break it down to sort of, these are massive societal issues that need to be tackled. And the way we sort of respond to it on sort of individual projects is that we're connecting sort of human beings to those issues, to those relationships. Hopefully also sort of, tying in community, tying in sort of the realities on the ground, what places need. And I think also we have a responsibility for beauty. We have a responsibility to make these things sort of cultural. People want, everyone has sort of an innate need and a want to be part of something that is sort of, that somebody put care into it, right? Ultimately, we want to be in places where somebody cares. And I think we have a tremendous power to sort of wrap those things together.
I think one thing I would mention to students, and my experience and what we do right now is really high-end residential design and build, is just there's so much opportunity right now in our field. I graduated the program in 2008 in a recession, and I couldn't get a job. You go right now on BSLA website or anybody who's in the landscape construction side, I don't even know anybody who's not hiring. So I think that for students, it's an amazing opportunity right now. There's a lot of work on the residential side. To kind of piggyback some of the things that Dan had mentioned. We're seeing a lot of our work right now is just setting expectations on timing of delivering some of these things, because with the pandemic, it has delivered this sense of, we need this immediately. So really for us, it's just been about having, open and honest conversations with timing on projects with people. And really at the end of the day, we're looking at a ton of work residential, and I don't think that's going to stop for a number of years. So I think just straight to the students, there's a lot of opportunity just in residential market that wasn't there, when I was a graduate. So there's a lot of opportunity. one other piece of advice I would say, if I could go back 12, 13 years ago, whatever it was now, is, consider starting at a job or trying to work somewhere where you can get some experience actually in the field. In hindsight, I wish I did that sooner than later. And I mean, kind of hands dirty, understanding how things are built. Too often, I think we jump into design offices and we get behind computers. So I wish I did that sooner in my career. But all in all, there's a ton of opportunity. It's an exciting time to come out of that program as a graduate. You got a lot of opportunity.
As probably the most recent graduate on the panel, I always struggled to find how all of that, what does it mean to me as an individual when I'm going into this field, because I feel as if the environmental problem is an undercurrent in all of our work. As soon as we come on the project, we know it's got to reach certain requirements environmentally. But me, at my firm, we do everything but residential, so everything but a personal home. A lot of public work, a lot of urban work, parks, and I've been constantly coming up with. I was jotting ideas down of like, what is the future of landscape architecture to me, and it's yes, it's environmental, but it's also the social aspect, which we've talked about. But how does that relate to me in my work and every day? Drafting and drawing and designing, even red lines, which are things that you'll do in the field, is that I remain focused and meaningful in my work, and that I'm always trying to create the right landscape for the right place, but for the right reason. And we're always trying, we're going to have to be equitable and multi-generational. And that's something I'm always doing. I'm pushing myself in our designs and to be spontaneous and provocative around landscape and stewardship. But then I was breaking down what's happening within firms and shaking up the box of a studio itself. And clearly the field is very white, very cis het. And I had come into a firm that was all that. And so I had already been breaking a few barriers myself. And I was constantly just myself and joyous about it. And so that has helped me get where I am and why I'm probably on the panel as the most recent graduate of only 5 years. Because I've just been happy with the work that we're doing. But I guess I'm going to finish by saying in our office, the value is all perspectives, and we're trying not to be ageist, or I'm approaching people not to be ageist, and that all the people in the firm and in the office should be heard and listened to. Revisiting the sense of professionalism and what it looks like and what it sounds like. I've had to deal with a lot just having my hair, a bit more noticeable. And so like, what does it look like and sound like to be professional? And we need to focus and say there is no rules and that everyone is equal. So essentially, that's where I'm at in building in my firm. I would be very interested to know what all the other panelists have thoughts on that.
I'll kind of piggy off what Russell said more about, I guess my experience has been more kind of in the built environment, really understanding. My start was in design build, so and high-end residential, and obviously I expanded up to more public, bigger scale projects. But I think really understanding how these systems are built in a real environment, and really understanding site design and understanding how to make adjustments in the field when you're dealing with contractors, and being able to understand how to solve these problems on site. Like, I'm very comfortable if it's an issue on a project to go on site and discuss with a contractor and solve these issues just because of experience. So if I would say anything, I think that really understand how these components all work and how you can build them, how you can document them to a contractor to build them successfully on a project. I mean, another thing I would give you advice on is really hone in on your business development. And that's a lot of building relationships that, I mean, to make it, that brings in money to the firm, companies. So really hone in on that aspect of building your relationships, have great communication, and also being a person who can coordinate very well with your subcontractors on projects, if that's dealing with MEP, structural, civil, all these moving parts are important on projects and to successfully implement them. So those are things that I think are important than just, the simple master planning, because you can do master planning, but at the end of the day, what's important is that the project is being implemented and how it impacts the environment. So that would be one of my things I think you should take with you. I took I took a few courses with Michael. So that was kind of my start in understanding construction. Also, to kind of pick on Gretchen's presentation about, communities of color, I think here at Design Workshop, we were really focusing on understanding social justice and spatial equity and understanding how we can have an impact there. And I think, I could be way off basis, but I think our public outreach has to be stronger, to these communities and also to these the public officials and the agencies, and make it important to them to understand why these low income housing communities are not benefiting from some of these developments. It can be a simple thing. Our CEO wrote a thesis about this, and it was interesting. Something I read is that I don't remember the actual dates, but it seems that when these big public projects are implemented or coming of age, that more of the low income housing gets pushed further and further away from the centralized locations. And is how can we continue to not let that happen, because the further low income housing is pushed out, they can't access these nice open spaces for people to use and gather. So I think that's a work in progress, but I think public outreach has to be better. And it's hard to really tell an investor where they want to invest their money, but I just think that's something I think communication with agencies need to be a little better.
Okay, somebody else. Kathryn.
Well, I'm just going to echo what everybody else has said about getting out into the field and learning how things are built, because it will inform your future details. And you will learn a lot by asking and talking to the people who are building the work that you've designed. Learn from them, because they have a lot of sort of field experience that can be helpful for you. And I guess for the sort of students out there going out into the world, I would say that something that's been really helpful for me has been surrounding yourself with people whose experience and expertise you can draw upon. When Emily and I started our firm, I came from the custom residential sort of high-end world, and Emily came with a wealth of experience in institutional projects and commercial projects. And one of the things that's been really fruitful for me, and I believe for her, has been that we've learned a lot from each other, and we've been able to bounce ideas and questions. And so now we're both getting better at things that we did not know as much about prior to teaming up. That's allowed us in terms of business to have a diverse, or build, or we're in the process of building our diverse practice. So that's been something that I sort of see going into the future. Projects that we do are anything from Head Start programs for pre-K and kindergartners in underserved communities to high-end residences with pools. And so by offering design expertise and the same quality to all of those sort of groups is something that we can bring. And in terms of working with communities who are historically underserved, but getting them to start thinking about the world around themselves, and hopefully, you know, reaching these kids and getting them thinking and connecting. Because I think that the future of the practice sort of globally needs a more diverse body of professionals. And I think that one way to do that is to start connecting with children and sparking that interest and showing them like, these are possibilities, and you know, you're welcome here, you're needed, and your perspective is important. So we incorporate that perspective into our work and hopefully show them through our actions that they're valuable, and that going forward, that might be something that's worth exploring sort of for their own professional growth. So that's, I mean, I know that sustainability is huge, and we do that in our smaller projects, but I think that sustainability is both sort of environmental, but also social. And I think that those two systems are kind of what come together in the future of landscape architecture. Yeah, that's what I've got so far.
Thank you.
I think I might be up.
Yeah.
Kind of hard. Everybody said it all. They said it all. This is Lauren, everyone. I wrote down some notes. I'm going to try to hit like four points quickly. I think in light of, well, maybe what I'll start by saying is our firm is a little different. I always feel like we're, honestly, I call us like underdogs. Like people know who we are, but sometimes it feels like we don't know who we are because we're a collective of 5 principals who all have very different interests. I mean, even Steve and I have very different interests. And we just really are passionate about certain things that we all agree on, which is like design with nature, ecological restoration, cultural landscape preservation, beautiful craftsmanship. Like we kind of all got together and we love like what we do, and we have this common language, and we divide and conquer projects that either come through our door or that we decide to chase. And so sometimes we might decide to work on like a tiny little project that's literally like a $10,000 fee that is going to kill us because we know we're going to go over budget, but it's worth it because the ethos is like, we just can't not do it. You know, it's like the Roger Tory Peterson Center in Old Lyme, Connecticut. Like that is the Peterson guide to like every, you know, North American birds and blah, blah, blah. Like we got to do that. That's us. We believe in that. So, or we might end up doing like some awesome, incredible, like new science center at Harvard. And it's like a $12 million project, and that keeps us going for a while. And we're really grateful for those. So we're kind of all over the place. We do a lot of high-end residential. And I think maybe one thing I've noticed with COVID that everyone sort of started to talk about at different scales is I've seen a shift with residential landscape design since COVID. You know, we get a lot of New Yorkers who are buying stuff upriver, and not small stuff, like big stuff. Like a couple from, you know, Tribeca who says, I want to buy a 300-acre farm in, you know, wherever, Prairieville. And all of a sudden they're like, whoa, what do we do? That's a lot of farmland. And that's a huge watershed we're affecting with 100 acres of farmland and a shitload of fertilizer that this guy that, you know, we're leasing it to. So, you know, that there's like huge environmental impact there. So we've been taking on quite a bit of work that has to do with like large scale rural sites, really teaching clients about like how to change management practices, where to put the house, oftentimes educating an architect on why maybe the top of the hill might not be the most sensitive place to put the house. And like, let's actually work with what's there and like maybe take a, you know, page out of Lake Plato's book. So I think that that's one shift I'm seeing, is that everyone wants their little piece of wildness now. And I think what's really exciting is that it's happening in the urban realm, it's happening, you know, in the rural realm, and there's restoration that's happening in degraded landscapes everywhere. So that's awesome, because we wouldn't be in COVID if we weren't treading on areas of wildness that we shouldn't be pushing on in the first place, and we had better development control. So that's kind of a big, like, big picture stuff. So we're seeing that trickling down. I think the second thing is we have a culture shift in our own studio, how we work. Obviously, people are working remotely, but what I'm realizing is we're really developing this like trust relationship and mutual respect with our colleagues in-house. And, you know, I've got a guy who's probably going to move to New York in the next couple of months, and that's okay. He's going to do that. Our studios are in Boston and in Princeton, but we're probably going to have him like come up once a week, or I'm sorry, like for once a month for a week, and he's going to stay on our farm and work out of our studio. And we've got a woman in India. I've got 2 people in California. It's just working, and it's kind of, that's like the new mode of collaboration. Obviously, when COVID's over, we hope that people will come back to the nest, you know, for the charrettes that we need them to do, and that'll happen. But I really think that it's changed the opportunity of who works for Stimson, because like not many people want to move to Princeton, Massachusetts. Let's be honest. I mean, it's not for everybody. So I think that's exciting, because the third part is we've decided to build a studio in Princeton on our farm. We're kind of tired of like trekking into the city. We're tired paying rent here in the center of town. And we just decided, you know, my husband grew up on a farm, and he's really used to that idea of, you know, watching his parents work. And when they go to work every day, they walk outside 50 feet to the barn and they milk the cows, and then they deal with the stuff they need to do. And then they go inside and they pay the bills. And so there was like no office, there was no driving to a remote location for your day job. He grew up in this like really insular, sort of like living, eating, breathing machine on the farm. So we're going to do that with our kids. We decided we want to do that. We want to live that way. And we want to invite everyone that we work with to, you know, experience that. So we're doing like a passive house project. We're going to try to be off the grid with it eventually when our town finally accepts solar credits. And that's exciting, because I think it does give opportunity for like this guy who, for instance, like wants to go to New York. Like when he comes in for, you know, 1 week a month to do charrettes and stuff, he literally will have a place to stay. Like we'll have these, like, you know, these new digs for people to like live out of. And so it's sort of like a rural studio model, which is very much like a live work model, but I really bridges home and work in a different way. And we're okay with that. And our firm sort of is, that's everyone in our office who's a principal or in a leadership position either has a partner, is married, has kids. So very much like respectful of like, there are other parts of our life that we have to balance. It's not just about landscape architecture, even though we, you know, feel like it is some days. So I think the last thing I wanted to say was something I learned, especially after COVID and during COVID now, working in such close proximity to my husband all the time, like 3 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's freaking crazy. And we are like, we get along really well, but we were like, okay, you know what? I can't handle another drive-by, I'm going to call it drive-by desk crit when it's just the 2 of us. And I've just worked for 2 weeks with my team on this project, and I'm psyched, and we're all psyched. And he comes over and he goes, why did you think about doing it like this? And he draws over it. And we're all like, ah. I mean, everyone knows what that's like, right? Whether it's your professor or your boss or whatever, in my case, Steve. And I realized our communication styles are not at all the same. Our leadership styles, our management styles aren't the same. We did not go to school for like leadership or management or any of this stuff. We went to school to be designers. And now is the time, and I know firms have been doing this for a long time, but we haven't, and I'm okay to admit this. Now is the time for us to take a course to get help. And so we are going through leadership training. And it sounds goofy, but it's really helpful. It's like therapy for, you know, us. And then we can actually model good behavior and like positive reinforcement. And then the other principals, we're going to do it with them too. And then we're going to do it with everyone in the office. And it's going to just help, because I realized just take one person out, that free 16personality.com test online. It's unbelievable. There's like 16 different personalities and everyone has a different response to a situation. And it has been compounded in our studio from COVID. So I would say students, take that quiz and take a course. Take a course if you can, because they don't teach you this stuff in school, for sure.
Thank you. Yes, we have already 4:50. So I want to really encourage some students to either in the chat or ask to get unmuted and get on board and yeah, have some great questions for our diverse alumni panel here.
I saw Justin Haley with a question.
Great. Thank you guys all. That was awesome. Really appreciate you guys coming and talking to us. My question is kind of two parts. Last year we met to talk again about the future of the profession. It was a very similar panel. A lot of you guys were here last year. We talked for a while, I think kind of naively, about what the next year had in store for us. I guess my question is, how is your, I think Lauren talked to this quite a bit, but how is your perception of landscape and our profession changed over the past year in particular? And then my second question is for the students, you know, when all of you professionals graduated, what do you think you were the most naive about going into the profession? Because I think a lot of us have this cookie cutter idea of landscape architecture, and I'm sure we're all in for a treat when we start working full time and cut out the internship gig. So those are my two questions. What were you naive about last year, and how has your perception of landscape changed over the past year? And then what were you naive about before you had graduated, either a master's or an undergraduate? Thank you.
Who's going to start?
I can jump in.
Sounds like you.
Go ahead, Sean.
Well, I'll just touch on the naive part. I think being, obviously I was still playing football for a while, but once I jumped back into it, I think the biggest thing I was naive about is that you're not always singled up on, like, you're not just a designer anymore. It's not like you're in school and just sitting there just designing. It's other parts of the business that you have to be involved in. And Lauren touched on that. You have to manage time. You have to manage budgets. Manage the client expectations. So you can be jumping from one project to another on a daily basis. So you have to be able to be very organized and be able to multitask. So that's one thing I was naive about and had to learn very fast, that you're not just going to sit on this project for like the next month. Like, you're going to be designing something here, then tomorrow, like, oh, we need help on this. So just get prepared for the just jump from project to projects.
I have one question from Henry. He's not a student, but I think it fits also to like new environments here. Henry, you want to ask it, or I should do that? Henry is curious how Lauren and others feel these new work-live arrangements may influence the way firms recruit new workers. Is the future remote contract designers?
You did a good job, Frank. Thank you.
Yeah, Henry.
I mean, for that question, I think, Emily and I just established our firm 2 years ago. So we have a sort of built-in, very flexible system for files and sort of operating in general. We live in different cities. That being said, there is a tremendous value to in-person generation of ideas and design. And so I think that for WOLA, while we're certainly very flexible in how we do our work and how we communicate with each other, there is still a need for us to see each other and sit down with trace and paper and talk about ideas and sketch them out. And so I think that, you know, while we'll certainly be flexible with new staff, we have found it helpful to have our current staff, you know, working in an office with us, because it allows us to show her how we do things and why we do things in a way that's constructive and generates growth, as opposed to like an instructive remote, yes, no, like this. And I think that that's something that's important when you're establishing the culture of your firm. So we're certainly flexible, but I don't think that a remote contract designer is something that at least WOLA is interested in, because our culture is important and that's how we do our best work.
I totally agree with that, Kathryn. I mean,
Yeah.
The scenario I'm describing is like a guy who's been with us for, you know, well over 6 years, who we love and we don't want to lose, right? We don't want him to go work with, you know, Victor in New York or wherever. You know, like,
You tell Sean I say hi.
yeah. Let's put it all up. So funny. So I think, you know, that's kind of our MO, is like, we're always trying to be flexible, accommodate the people that we really love. And I think the flexibility, people love the flexibility now. Like, they don't have to be in the office from 8:30 to 5:30 all the time. And I think we probably won't go back to that. You know, Steve and I will, obviously, because we're going to be living and, you know, living there and doing it. But I think people will, you know, we'll give them the freedom to work from home if they want to, you know, a certain amount of time during the week, and then they come in for meetings when they need to.
Yeah, I think what's sort of been interesting is that some things work better from work from home, at least for me and for some aspects of our office. And that's a lot of what we do is digital. And so we do a lot of 3D modeling. Every single project is 100% modeled out. And that's how we sort of work through our design process. And it's way more efficient to just Slack call my boss. I share my screen and say, like, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm doing. And we can talk through something, opposed to like setting out screenshots, then printing them out, finding a time where she's available, sketching over it, then translating it back. Like, that's not very efficient. Right. So sort of this ability to share a digital environment much more cleanly, more seamlessly, is actually been pretty great for some aspects of workflow, especially when you're really just crunching out design stuff. So I think that's been sort of a big surprise out of this whole scenario. But then on the flip side, I don't see sort of the gig economy translating to sort of design jobs. Sort of what we do is it ends up being pretty complicated, and people have a variety of different skill sets. And you don't know exactly what that person's going to be really good or have shortcomings at on some task you need from an internet bio. You're going to need to get to know them. You're going to need to sort of find out what their workflow is, what's the best place to put them into something. And things move fast. It's, you know, it's go, 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 go. And so you're not going to just hire somebody, they don't end up working. And so you can't just dump them and go. You need to find an employee who you work with, and over time you understand their strengths and other things, and then that way you start to ratchet them most rationally into whatever sort of task is necessary at the time. So I don't see a gigification of design employees.
Oh,
I just wanted to go back to piggyback on what Sean had mentioned to Justin's question about, you know, what I was a little bit naive coming out of the department. It was definitely, I had this certain perception that, you know, I was going to work for a firm and have a drafting table and a computer and, you know, maybe build some cool models. But I think what I was really naive to is, even just in residential side, there are so many roles out there. You know, a lot of you that are graduating through this program, you know, you're not all going to be landscape architects. And I think I didn't realize that. And that being said, a lot of you are going to be within design firms or construction firms as landscape architects, as project managers, as site supervisors, as estimators. I mean, all of those roles are very important and very critical. I think there's a huge role for students coming out of the LA program through Stockbridge in LA in the landscape construction side of things. So I guess in hindsight, I would just say that there's so many other roles to just strictly being a designer, is something that I was very naive to when I was, about to graduate.
And we have a couple people. Aidan has.
No, there's Lucia Pena. Send an email probably. Can you unmute her or?
Lucia, okay, all right, okay.
Hello. Oh, hi. So first of all, thank you all for taking the time to be here. And I just want to, first of all, touch on a little bit of what Kathryn was saying about bringing more diversity in the field in the future. And I just really think it's interesting how our perspective as students and yours is so different. And it kind of gives me a little hope to see the diversity we can bring in the future in terms of design, education, because the way we're learning it now is completely different from how you might have learned it. So that made me kind of hopeful. And sorry. The second thing is just the intersectionality of landscape architecture is so wide. It is artistic and ecological, social, and political. And I was just wondering if you guys had some experience with working with the social and political aspect and the focus of who we are building for in the future. Is there a priority? Is there the different scales and boundaries of it? If you guys could share that, please.
It's a really good question. And it's a big one.
I'm not sure I quite understand it, but I think maybe I can try to answer it. I think that every project we work on has some intersectionality, if I'm using the word right, of the things you talked about. Maybe some drop out the social if it's a more private project that doesn't have as many, the visitorship. Maybe sometimes the economic aspect isn't as fleshed out if it is also a private project. But I think that always we try to bring the environmental to the table. I'm not sure I'm really answering it. I'm flashing into a project right now that we're working on. And it's a difficult project because we are coming to the table as the landscape architects, the only landscape architects on the team. And I feel, maybe this answers your question, I feel it is our civic duty. When we get licensed as landscape architects, we have to do that honor code thing where you protect the health, safety, welfare of the public, right? Or the greater good, blah, blah, blah. It's our duty to tell and educate not only the client, but the rest of our team on what that means for the project. And we are butting heads left and right with other members of the team because some people don't want trees. Some people don't think planting belongs in that plaza. Some people blah, blah, blah. So I guess I feel I don't know if I'm answering you, but a lot of our, I'm assuming some of the bigger work that's done by Jim Corner's firm and design workshop, that's going to happen every step of the way. People didn't just accept Ian McHarg's word in 1969 and say, great, design with nature. We don't have that. People just don't have that attitude. And now it's coming back because of COVID. And all of a sudden you see the Boston Globe publishing that article, that Sherry and others wrote. I think that it's not a new idea, but it kind of got suppressed for a while. I think it's coming back, and I think it's coming back in the numbers with the social stuff. Black Lives Matter last year is never been as strong in my lifetime. I remember the Rodney King stuff. I remember a lot of stuff in my youth. I've never seen the backlash that I saw in our country last year, and it's awesome. It's really, really great to finally see this happening, and I see it affecting our projects. the attitude, an interview process. We're interviewing tomorrow, you know, like next month we have an interview. The first thing they said, the client said in the RFP, your team, your design team must have diversity and equity within the team. I hadn't seen that before this year. So I think it's shifting. I'm not sure if that answered you, but.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you for unmuting me too. But yeah, that totally answers my question. And yeah, it's just like such a broad role that we have to fill and that we are responsible for, that I just wanted to know how maybe just from your experience approach those situations in the future. But yes, you absolutely answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, and we have Aiden, whose hand has been up for a while, and then we got Corina. So I'm gonna unmute Aiden.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming today. As a junior landscape architecture major, I've been sending out my portfolio a lot to try and get an internship. And I'm constantly thinking like, how can I set myself apart, make myself stand out? So I was just wondering if you guys had any examples of, you know, being able to stand out like an applicant getting a job, or if you had any strategies on how you did it, or if there's just like something simple that I can learn that could really make a difference being a young landscape architect just trying to get a job.
Aiden, I would say if you can draw well or decently, that's kind of a lost art. If I saw something come across my table that was how you can kind of think on paper, that's super helpful. I think we all tend to want to have like a super polished portfolio. And I think it would be more like make it feel like a sketchbook, and kind of your thoughts on paper are huge. The other thing I would say, send something hard mail. I mean, and print it. I know it's not as sustainable, but all everybody gets is 1 million emails a day with 1 million inquiries and attachments. If you sent me something nice in the mail, or a really interesting subject line, like I'm your next guy, make sure you open this, stuff like that.
That might work for some folks, but not for others.
I think something to remember is make sure everything is extremely clear, but you know, the format that people are going to be reviewing your portfolio is also shifting. I mean, people probably won't want to admit this, but I bet you a lot of portfolios are going to get reviewed on phones, right? Because people are answering 1 million emails. There's 1,000 things going on, and when you have a spare minute somewhere, you're going to just go through it on your phone a lot of times. So I'm not saying make a portfolio only for a phone, but keep in mind that it will be digested that way as well. So.
I would say, my experience, documentation is important of how organized your portfolio is, and how your portfolio tells a story, you know, of a project from start to finish. If you can show clear, clean documentation of a project, that'll help you a lot. That they know you understand the project from, you know, schematic to design development to construction. So that's important when someone's reviewing your portfolio.
I would remember that white space is as important as image. And if you give 4 or 5 really strong images room to breathe, as opposed to giving a dozen maybe less great images, it comes across better. Editing is your friend. And also, don't let the perfect like get in the way of the very good. I think that at least for myself, I really hesitated sending out my portfolio at first because it wasn't perfect. And I kept going and going. And I think that as designers, this may be a global issue also. But at a certain point, you've just got to start sending that guy out there. And so that would be my advice, is to, you know, get it good enough, have someone spell check it, make sure that it's graphically a well-designed presentation, and just send it out. Then
you have something to add? Like you get a lot of portfolios, I guess. how, or also difference, like maybe 10 years, 5 years now?
Frank, you're asking me?
Yeah, how do you get in?
Well, what I was going to say, and this goes back to actually some earlier questions and comments, was, and I've been doing this actually on the opposite side as an employer, is asking people what they want, what their interests are, because it's important from an employer side to get somebody who's well matched with your interests. And the opposite's true too. You don't, you're embarking on your career. You should really be going to the place where you have, some passion and an interest. So know who you're applying to, and maybe, apply to the places really which interest you the most, and then reflect that interest in your cover letter. It really means a lot. And, I 35 years ago or whatever it was when I graduated, I just applied everywhere. You try to apply to the best places and you just keep at it and you'll find work. There's plenty of work out there. You'll get the internships. You're really qualified. So you're going to be in good shape. You'll definitely get an internship. But just try to get it at a place that you really want to, which is going to suit your career best.
Yeah, I would say don't underestimate that whole, back to Justin's, like, what were you naive about? Don't have implicit bias about firms, because if you do that, you could really rule out some great opportunities. And like what Russell was saying, he didn't think he'd do this, he ended up doing this, or he wished he had done that. I think that's, firm culture is a big deal. You're going to be working with people. You don't want to be around people. You spend more time with people at work, than you do with people at home, and you want to be able to click. So much of what we interview for is culture and chemistry. I mean, at the end of the day, you're hiring someone who's green. We say green, right? You're new, you're freshly graduated. It's all kind of the same ball of wax, but like, what about you makes you uniquely suited to us? Do you love to cook? Are you really good at cooking? Because that's a plus. That kind of thing. Do you know how to garden? Like, you're good at weeding. So I think
shaving sheep.
Yeah, exactly. You're not a lamb. I think if you find that place, the other aspect of it, like opposite of what Dan was saying, I totally agree with what he was saying, but the opposite angle is live where you want to live and then figure out the work. That's another attitude. And we're kind of lucky enough. Steve's like, he's like in his enlightenment period, right? And like the pyramid, I'm like way down here. He's up here. He's like, I live where I want to live and I let the work sort of like come to me. And that's really lucky. That's not normal, right? Like, I mean, I feel very lucky that in some ways I want to live here, right? Like I grew up 2 towns away. My parents are here. So I think that's unique, but that's another attitude. If you don't let everything that you went to school for define every aspect of you. I mean, we're all something more than just landscape architects. So if you're really happy in an urban environment, then stay in the urban environment. But I just feel like people who are happiest in our studio seem like they're really happy outside of the studio too. So that helps. You don't want to be miserable in your job or miserable at home because you're like living in a place you don't want to live. So.
There was a question about when you embark on your career, what did you do and how did it affect you and what did you think you wanted? And my career, I thought when I graduated that I wanted to work on big projects, big important projects. And I worked on a 5,000-acre new town for 3 years, and then I worked 7 years on the Central Artery project. And what I realized was what I really loved was the landscapes that were so important to me at a personal level. So when you read about my webpage, you'll know, like Lauren and Steve, the agrarian communities that were so important to what they are the places that they really love to craft and build. And that's true for me too. And that's where I found, because I've always loved to kind of have my hands in things and build things. And when you're a planner on a 5,000-acre new town, no matter how much you love how urban mix and how retail space affects open space, it's different than creating those landscapes that you really feel passionate about. So, you know, your career is going to take some twists and turns. It's all great experience, but if you can really find what really is in your heart, that's really where you want to go. So, my experience.
Well said, Dan.
Yeah, I could echo that. Go where your heart is.
It's a hard one to figure out. You know, I wasted, you know, 15 years or whatever, 10 years of my time doing all sorts of stuff. But if you can figure that out, that's great.
I think it echoes. I feel like it echoes what I was feeling earlier of like just being authentic to yourself and finding your truth and what landscapes are at your heart, and you'll always be happy to go to work the next day. And you know, if you're looking to what can you do in your portfolio to be a bit different, is have a little bit of yourself in there, whether it be, again, your hobbies, describe your hobbies, and think of your narrative as your introduction to this person, but at a personal level. And, you know, you don't want to, I try to say, don't be as cookie cutter, you know, whether your graphic style is artful, you know, look at what all the other renderings look like and try to do something maybe a little different. Maybe put a dog running in the foreground. You know, there's just things that say make me smile, and a portfolio will instantly get, and you know, a second look. And I also am I look at people's CVs and see what they've done. What are the little odd jobs they've done? Have they been in customer service? Have they worked at a restaurant? I know I was a landscape contractor and a landscape maintenance person for so many years, and went to a horticultural high school. And I've seen that in other people's resumes, and they don't have the best portfolio as maybe someone graduating from GSD, for instance, but we hire them because I know their passion and heart is in landscape. And those are our best employees still. So it's finding, I guess, your heart a bit and trying to get it into your portfolio will help. And wearing your
okay,
yeah.
There was maybe one hands up question, Corinna. So I don't want that you run away. Corinna, you're next.
Hello. Thank you all for coming again. It was lovely to see you all. I guess I just kind of have a question both on like the residential side of things and also the public side of things. So obviously like public forums and meeting that client face to face is like a huge part of this, like, you know, kind of design. And my question is like, how has COVID kind of impacted that face to face interaction with the client, and like how you would kind of get that basis of understanding with them?
A whole lot of Zoom meetings. But one thing we've tried to do is a lot of our work is right around the town of which we work in, and that's strategic. So what we've done is, you know, printed hard copies, dropped them at the people's front door, so there's not the Zoom issues or errors, and then had a walkthrough presentation in Zoom. Other things we've done is blown up drawings, put them on foam core, and we have presented on easels in garages. I mean, it's kind of doing what you got to do at the residential scale to still kind of keep the pipeline full. So a lot of Zoom, but, you know, also being creative about kind of dropping off stuff in order to kind of have that face-to-face with the client at a safe distance, you know, of course, wearing a mask, that type of thing. That's what we've done.
Thank you.
I have a lot of really cold client meetings outside with them, like super frigid, you know, standing in the snow kind of thing. We have a lot of outside site visits for sure. But I think I've had a little bit, I think it's been a little difficult for me in particular because of my personality type that I'm learning. I have a difficult time separating home and work, and I give my cell phone out a lot. And because I have that personality of wanting to get to know the client and then they want to get to know me, I have a lot of texting and Zoom calls and FaceTiming, not just a client, like private client, like architects all the time, Saturday morning, Sunday night. And it's kind of a problem. I think I become a better communicator. Sometimes I literally just have to say, hey, great idea. I'll get back to you on Monday. But I found there's been like no boundary. And once you give that cell phone out, and even email, because everything's like digital. They're like, sometimes I feel like, what do you call it? I'm like I'm like animal roadkill, right? I'm like being pecked at all the time. I'm tired. I mean, you guys must feel the same way. Isn't it exhausting? It's like every 25 seconds, I get like 65 emails a day, and there's no way I can keep up. And why'd I give my cell phone to that particular client? So I think I have learned to be more direct and transparent, which maybe is authentic. It's kind of the age, right? Of just saying like, thanks, but I can't do it yet. I totally hear you. I'll get back to you. And I didn't have that before COVID. It was more like, 8:30 to 5:30. I didn't do the emails at night. And so, yep.
Yeah, I mean, sort of the digital realities of everything get more pervasive in your life. Like we use Slack a lot at work, and then that starts to now bleed into, like, I'm working on a project with SOM, and now like SOM's on my Slack, and so now like they're messaging me at 9 p.m. and I gotta like respond, and it just is sort of endless.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, sort of, I'm working on a 1,600-foot tower in Manhattan, and it's a unbelievably complex structure that we sort of have to negotiate all the landscapes on deck. And there's constant meetings, and these meetings I think are actually more effective on Zoom, because instead of being in a room with 15 other people and I have to like look at some projected thing, like I just have everything right in front of me. People can sketch on it. I think that's actually a better way to convey, especially technical items on very complex projects. So there's some upside, I think.
Would you guys agree you save money on fees because you're not traveling? I mean, our credit card bills and all that, it's like down. It's great.
Well, I'm not responsible for that part of the budgeting, but yeah, there's definitely a lot less, there's virtually zero travel. And I think, there's going to be less in the future.
Our collective carbon footprint has gone down.
Yep.
Yeah, I think what everyone said, like Zoom is a big thing, because I actually don't work on any projects even though I'm in California and LA, all of my projects are I'm working on RFP in Florida right now, but I'm also working on projects in Montana, Colorado, Raleigh. So the only way I can really communicate very well with the project teams and the client is through Zoom. So that's kind of how we're going about it right now.
We do have one person with their hand raised. It's a Karen or Kieran. So.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's Karen. Thank you, everyone. I love hearing from different professionals in the field. I just had a question. So I know you guys were mentioning before how there are different roles within the field, and I've kind of explored like different possibilities of that other than just sticking to designing, but I've also thought about having a residential firm myself, but everything can change, as you guys have obviously mentioned through your stories. But I was curious what kinds of challenges you folks faced that you weren't expecting when you did have your own firm. So I guess going more past like the things you weren't expecting after school, but like what specific challenges totally caught you off guard that you were able to overcome?
I think for me in particular on the residential side, we are just as much of a construction company as we are a design company. My whole background was design and build, but not business. And that has been a trip, and Lauren kind of mentioned, I'm doing a lot of YouTubing. I do a lot of, general stuff like that. But the reality is, there's a huge accounting portion to the business. There's a human resources portion to the business. These are the things that I personally didn't learn in school so much. And has been, I'm fortunate I have a partner who started this company 30 years ago. So some of those things were in place. But for me, that's been my biggest learning curve is it's always been about design. But now my roles changed so much that I'm much more kind of doing business admin and sales and branding, if you will, than I am designing. So it's just really kind of interesting how it's evolved for me.
Okay. Thank you.
I imagine, I mean, I haven't worked a lot on on residential projects, but I imagine this would sort of translate. It's everything's always way more complicated than you think it's going to be at the beginning, and everything takes at least twice as long. So just to sort of keep that in mind. At least that's been my experience.
If you wanted to pick a profession that has challenges, like they're unlimited in landscape architecture. So, you know, if you can just find them at every level, whether it's a design challenge or a business challenge or a social interaction presentation challenge. I mean, it's like you'll never stop growing.
Okay.
I think for myself and for Emily, when we established our firm, it was tremendously helpful to have one another. I don't think I would have been interested in starting my own firm. Working with Emily and sort of having, you know, tough conversations. You know, it's not all rainbows and unicorns. Like, you know, we disagree on things sometimes, and because we like and respect each other, we have those discussions and we find a way to move forward and strengthen our firm and our culture and all of those good things. So I think that the most important thing for me in starting my own firm was finding a business and design partner who shares the same values as I do, and who's committed to listening and not listening to just, you know, then talk, but listening to understand. And I think that that's been tremendous for both of us, and we're able to each contribute our strengths. I'm good at marketing. Emily does a lot of the financial stuff. We work together on HR. So it's like we have our expertise and we strengthen each other and sort of hopefully move forward. We're at least growing, so that's good.
I think Kathryn just sort of she hit upon something which I think is important, that I don't think design school necessarily teaches. And I think UMass does a better job than a lot of programs based on conversations I've had with friends who have been at the GSD and RISD. But I think that the nurturing quality of collaboration is something that inherently is not really promoted when you're in design school, because the whole purpose of the studio is to then do your work. And let's pretend you're doing your work not together, you're doing it as individual projects. At the end of the semester, you pin it up on the wall, and then everybody gets a piece of it and gets to like say what they think and critique the hell out of it. It's a very, very difficult profession and sort of like school experience. And I think UMass is a lot more nurturing than other programs. But when you come out of school, the reality is like you go to work for a firm and it's a group effort. And I think that well, two things. One is stay in touch with your colleagues. Remember that collaboration does start in school. Don't hoard your work, share it. You're only as good as your classmates, right? Like I had a pretty good class and we shared a lot of stuff and a lot of information. And, you know, one of my classmates is my managing director. We just promoted him. I don't know what I'd do without him. And he and I sat next to each other that very first year at LARP. And I just love that. I love that, like, it's come full circle and now he's with us and he's like my right hand. And I think that, like, you need people around you that are going to support you, especially when you get to the top. There's this expression, like, it's lonely at the top. It's true, because we have a practice with two partners, my husband and I, other people at the top. But at the end of the day, like, you know, Russell running his company, you know, it's a closed book scenario, probably. Dan, if you don't have partners, like, you are in charge of everything, and it's really overwhelming and stressful, and it can be very isolating. So I found that I get support from colleagues that are my age who are in similar situations. I would cite like Matthew Cunningham, close friend, close colleague, close collaborator. I have no shame in texting him or calling. Maybe I kind of bug John Kett for some reason. I think he's like a really good guy, and I don't know him that well. He's at Reed Hildebrand, but I always call him when I have like a tax credit issue or something. I'm like, I know he knows what to do. I have no shame in just calling him and saying, hey, it's me again. It's that time of year. Can you give me some advice? And I think COVID's actually helped that and broken down these barriers of like competition between firms even. And Gretchen has done an incredible job getting people together across firms. Like I always see these emails of like, hey, another panel, or hey, let's have a workshop and get people together. And I think that's so important. We're such a small field.
Yeah,
you know?
piggybacking on that, and Sean had mentioned this earlier about networking. I think another thing that I never had a sense of was how real the UMass network is. You know, I was a grounds manager at Phillips Academy. It's a 700-acre Olmsted design landscape. It was largely a maintenance job. Everyone who was my go-to arborist was a Stockbridge grad. My go-to turf guy was a Stockbridge grad. We had that common bond. Right now, we've hired a number of kids that come out of landscape architecture. We're interning 2 kids this year out of Stockbridge. So that is a real connection. You know, like I said, the people that sit next to you in class are not so much these days, are in your class. You know, they're part of your network and they're going to be there for years. So don't underestimate that UMass network, because I think it's very real. It's very unique. You know, and it's something really special.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we're 5:30. Well, if it would be in person, we'd probably go out for a drink. We cannot do that now, but well, I think I don't want that you spend too much time. I'm thank you so much, everybody who joined, and specifically Adam, Dan, Kathryn, Lauren, Russell, Sean, and Victor, and Gretchen. Gretchen gave a great introduction. You kicked that off very well, and I think we covered a lot about the future of the profession, but also about your future, and so, and the network, you know, we're doing here, you know, alumni. It's important, you know. So, and I'm happy you came today and could, you know, we could have this discussion here. Okay, well, so too bad, right? We're gonna. So I'm gonna stay. I think a student is staying here. I'm staying here because a student has to, you know, with a talk. So he didn't forget it. But
it's not the Procopio road, you know?
No, but yeah, and hey, Sean, great connecting you, because I haven't seen you since I taught you the Kenrick Park studio, and
yeah, it's
you're a great example of like where you can go, you know, like
yes, I kind of been, I guess, moving around, kind of like a Renaissance man, just kind of just finding my path. But I'm happy where I'm at now. It's a great, you know, overall company of, you know, I mean, I'm actually doing residential now, and it's amazing to see the type of money these people spend.
Oh yeah, it's wild.
Like, if we could just have half of that, we can do an amazing public project.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, but yeah, I mean, I think the profession is going in a great direction, and I think the whole COVID situation definitely gave us a different perspective on how to appreciate the earth and appreciate the spaces that we have.
I just have to ask, what position did you play, Sean?
Here we go with this. I was hoping like no football questions.
I mean, doesn't everybody want to know?
Well, you know, I played at UMass. I was All-American there. And I played cornerback. So I'm sure you're gonna look through the archives. Russell, Liam told me to say hey.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
He's a good guy. He's done quite well, that guy.
Yeah, he's doing well. He's going to Kentucky now, coaching. So
yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. So my football days are over.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Well, thank you, Frank. This was great.
Yeah,
thank you everyone for coming. Always love talking to students.
Yeah,
no, I think graduate students, and of course we like to see each other too. But, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Soon, hopefully. Victor, see you soon, hopefully.
Yeah, just let me know.
Yeah. Miss New York.
Yeah, come down.
Thank you.
Hey, Frank.